Hello, fellow travelers, and welcome to Versus Stars podcast. All my loyal listeners, thank you for continued support. And remember, click the subscribe button, everybody. It's an amazing episode because Ron Marz boards the mothership. You know him as the writer of Green Lantern and Silver Surfer. Now he's the writer of Warlock Rebirth and Resolution. Come aboard as we go traversing the stars. Hi, Mr. Marz. Thank you so much for coming to the Versus Stars podcast.
Thanks for having me, Jeff. It's good to be back.
Like I said off there, I'm a huge fan, and this is a complete honor. I'm a huge Kyle Rayner fan, going all the way back. So this is fantastic for me. Thank you so much for joining me.
Well, good. This gives me something to do on a Tuesday night.
Well, this highlights my Tuesday night. So I was reading. So you're described as the script doctor for a new series called Fireflies. So what does this mean exactly? What is a script doctor?
So yeah, I didn't think I was going to be a script consultant for a TV show in India, but these things sort of, tend to fall out of the sky, and you go, okay, well, let's try that. So they basically gave me all the scripts for all 10 episodes of this TV show in India called Fireflies. The subtitle is Parth Aur Jugnu, which is basically Parth and Jugnu. Those are the names of two of the characters in the series, and it's sort of an Indian mythic version of Stranger Things, because it's got it's kids on bikes. We have a genre called kids on bikes, but it's kind of an Indian version of that, with a very sort of mythic Indian story, and they brought me in to sort of be an outside pair of eyes to look at the dogs are excited about it too. To be another pair of eyes on the script, and just sort of a story doctor for the character stuff, it was obviously the Indian mythology stuff that's in it is not my wheelhouse, although I've worked on Indian comics, and I'm not unfamiliar with it, but it's not what I grew up with, certainly. So I think the team that we eventually had on the show, the producers, the writers who wrote the actual episodes, the director, I think it was a really nice brain trust to put this thing together as hopefully sort of a show that could be consumed in India, but also here. It's Indian mythology, but it's also pretty universal stuff about kids in junior high school and high school, and there's a love story, and it's an Indian story, but it's a universal story.
So when you're thinking about the script as the script doctor, are you thinking about in terms of what makes the show good, or what will make the show digestible for the American audience?
No, really, just what makes the show good. I was not thinking about the American audience. I was thinking about the story, which is really how I approach anything that I do. Story comes first, characters come first. So I tried to look at it through the lens of what to me is a pretty universal. It's how does this story work best? What makes sense for these characters? And the writers did a really nice job on it, and we went through and tweaked stuff, and there was a sense of this part works, this part doesn't track narratively from what sets it up. Let's make sure that the victories as well as the defeats for the characters are earned. So yeah, it was a fascinating experience. So I would we would have a meeting once a week on Zoom, and try to sync up our schedules. It would be sort of early in the morning for me, and the end of the workday for them. Sync up our schedules and really dig into my notes on what the scripts were like, and then I would obviously type up the notes too and send that to them. But I tried to stop short of here's how this dialogue should read, or I
Mm.
didn't. I approached it in the same way that I do when I edit somebody's comic. I don't, it's not my job to go in and do, tell them to do what I would do. That's not, to me, that's not being a good editor. It's not being a good script doctor. Your job in that case is to make the writer's story, and in this case, the writer and the producer and everybody that was on the India side, to make their story as best as it can be, not to make the story the way I would do it.
Now, I know English is one of the primary languages in India. Was the script written originally in English, or was it in I'm not sure the native language of India, but
yeah, the scripts were in Hindi. So I got translated versions of the scripts, and obviously we when we would do our meetings, everybody was speaking English, and my notes were in English. So thankfully, they're all bilingual. I'm a dummy who's not. So it was just the same as any other sort of story meeting. And then my notes would get put into the scripts, and they would come back, and we would agree that okay, this works, or maybe this needs to be tweaked a little bit more. But it was a very organic process, and it was very much a process of nobody being territorial, nobody being overly precious about this is mine and it's not going to change. Everybody involved was more than happy to. We always say everybody's pulling on the oars in the same direction. We're all trying to get this. We're all in the same boat trying to get it into the dock, and I'm really happy with the way it turned out. And I'm actually just starting to see the episodes now, since it premiered about 10 days ago, and it's on the streaming service Z5, and the episodes are there. So it's really cool for me to see these characters who were just names on paper, now turned into real people. Casting is great. Special effects are really good. The music is really good. It's kind of the same thing as doing a comic. Like my script is kind of useless for a comic, right? It's nobody goes to the comic store to buy a script. They go to the comic store to buy a comic with with art and color and dialogue and sound effects and all of that kind of stuff. So this was very much the same scenario where the scripts were the raw material, the scripts were the recipe, and now the meal is finally being served up.
Now the interesting thing is, because they said it was written first in Hindi and then moved over to English, are things sometimes lost in translation from one language to another, and how did you deal with that?
There were probably some cultural blind spots in the process, but I think we sort of figured them out. And whenever I wasn't sure of the way something worked narratively in the script, I would say, is this a script hole that we're dealing with, or is this a situation where this is cultural shorthand for you guys, but I don't get it?
Right.
And most of the time it was not cultural shorthand. It was just like, oh yeah, we need to sort of patch that plot hole. But I have, like I said, I've worked with Indian publishers before. I've been to India, so I had some sense of how those interactions go sometime. And just, I've always found that just being sort of upfront and honest about, look, there's stuff that I don't know, and sometimes I don't know what I don't know. So you guys have to be upfront with me and not be afraid to call me out and say, hey, stupid, this is how this works.
So when we're talking about making sure things track and the story follows correctly, the story has a lot of magic, fantasy, things of that nature. And magic, is magic hard to track? Because once again, once you get into magic, there's a lot of possibilities open quite far. How do you make sure that the magic makes sense going throughout the story?
Well, you just, it's like writing Doctor Strange, right? You have to sort of establish what your parameters are and then stick to them. so that the audience knows kind of what's possible and what's not. And we did talk about some of that stuff, particularly with kind of the magical aspects of uh, one of the main characters, who's kind of this magical boy. We had discussions of, all right, well, what's the extent of his powers? Can he do this thing? If he can do this thing, if he can, whatever the thing was at the time, can he turn invisible? Does he have super speed? Does he have like can he heal himself or others? Let's figure out all that stuff ahead of time, so that it's not like a magic get out of jail card for the story, and he can just do whatever he needs to do at the time, because then that sort of sucks the drama out of what we're doing. Again, it's like writing a magical character in a comic, where if you don't have the parameters, if Doctor Strange can just turn Thanos into a potted plant on page 2, it's, there's no story left, right? So you have to have some, you have to set up the box that you're working in and then stick with it, because otherwise, there's no drama left. There's no real impression of danger.
Yeah, I think the part that always gets me on Magic, like a character like Zatanna in DC, if you can say anything backwards to make it happen, why not just be like, I win backwards, and just it solves the problem, you're done, move on.
Yeah, it's a thorny issue, and I think that's one of the reasons that it's probably one of the reasons that a Doctor Strange comic or a Doctor Fate comic or a Zatanna comic really lasts that long. There's not a 300 issue run of Doctor Strange. It's there's stops and starts, because it's hard. It's harder to come up with situations that really test your character if they can do virtually anything.
Yeah.
I know it's sometimes it's the argument about Superman. Oh, Superman's hard to write, or he's not interesting because he's too powerful. It's not really the case. I mean, the Superman's just like the rest of us. He has the same abilities as the rest of us, in terms of his emotional and mental well-being. I mean, that's where Superman is really tested. It's not whether he can pick up a building or not. We know he can do that. So you have to put those types of characters in situations where their inner selves are tested, not necessarily what they can do, in terms of superhero guys.
So, like I said, your series contains fantasy, mystery, magic, mythology. So, how hard is it to balance all these elements into a good, coherent story?
It really wasn't that different from telling a comic story, because there are always, generally in comics, there's some sort of not supernatural element, but there's some element that makes it a little different from the world outside your window. It is the world outside your window, as Stan Lee said, but there's always there's a blind guy jumping off a building, or there's a guy who has who has spider powers. I think stories are stories for me. They're all kind of cut from the same cloth, and I think the main thing is to make sure that the audience cares about your characters, and the audience believes in the reality of the story, the world that you've created, and the audience believes in the characters and is invested in their story. If the audience cares about your characters, they'll go along for the ride for anything. There's the sense of what happens next is why people come back to serialized fiction, which is what comics are. It's what TV is.
Now, listen, you've had an amazing career with in like spacefaring stories, like Silver Surfer, Green Lantern, things of that nature. To writing stories at that scope, and sort of like the opening of like cosmic powers of that nature, help you write something that's also fantasy based? Is there a similar thread to these type of stories?
I just think writing in general, it's like any other muscle. The more you use it, the better you get at it. The more facile you get at it. Whether I'm writing a outer space cosmic story, or a crime story, or a horror story, it's it's to me it's all the same stuff, because it all comes from the characters, and the characters, you have to believe in the reality of the characters, and you have to invest the reader in your characters. And if if you can do that, everything else is gravy. And if you can't do that, nothing else matters.
I like that. So you said that the Fireflies can be found on, you said Z5. Is that
Yeah.
accessible to American audiences?
Yeah, in fact, if you go to my Twitter feed, which is at Ron Marz, one of the most recent posts is a link to the Z5 streaming site, and you can just watch all the episodes.
Oh, very cool. So we'll definitely check it out.
Yeah, it's a great deal of it in Hindi, some of it in English. There's some animation that goes along with it. There's it's a really interesting mix of elements. But ultimately you're invested in the story of these kids, and that's why hopefully people will watch all 10 episodes. And it was, to me, it was my job to make sure that you came back every time to find out what happened to those kids.
Well, it sounds like a fantastic series, and I so we'll check it. I'll put a link to your Twitter on the in the notes. Everyone can find it. Plus, it does look fantastic. I got to watch a trailer as well that you sent me a link to, so it was very cool looking.
Cool, thanks, man.
No problem. So you're also you're so busy right now. You're also the writer of Warlock Rebirth as well, which is I believe a miniseries, which is listed as being part of the 80s, 90s continuity of stories. And what does that mean exactly? And does that mean it's not attached to what's happening now in Marvel?
Well, look, I think everybody gets too sort of wrapped up and invested in, where's this, what's this continuity and how's it fit in? And look, they're all made up stories. They're all imaginary stories. So the Warlock Rebirth series, just like the Silver Surfer Rebirth series, is set sort of in my run with Ron Lim on Silver Surfer, and frankly, somewhere is close enough for me. I didn't want to. It's Infinity Gauntlet era, Marvel cosmic stuff. So I didn't want to. I didn't want to do one of those things where, like, oh, this story happens between panels 3 and 4 on page 7 of issue 92. Like that to me is not a story. That's that's like a continuity checklist, and that's not really of interest to me. That's not why I write stories. So I'm telling stories kind of set in that era with the characters as they were in that era, but I'm just writing a story that I hopefully think is interesting, and hopefully the audience comes along for the ride.
Now, you also wrote Silver Surfer Rebirth, which also existed around the same time period. Does this mean the stories are going to connect somewhere, or will they connect?
Yeah, the Surfer, the end of the Surfer series and the beginning of the Warlock series have some elements that are sort of common, and there are ties in both of those series. And as the Warlock series goes on, I think what those ties are and how they will play out going forward is part of the attraction, hopefully.
Now, the antagonist of the story because the first issue is already out, so people can go ahead and buy it, is Eve. So Eve is, once again, is as the antagonist. Is it a personal issue with Warlock, or is it more of a purpose-driven conflict with Warlock?
Well, it's more purpose-driven because she's never met Adam Warlock. She's never met anybody. She's just basically been born from the same sort of cocoon that Adam Warlock was born from. So she is, in that sense, a newborn, but obviously incredibly powerful and incredibly prepared to sort of take Adam Warlock's mantle.
Now, as you said, being that she's just been born, and she's born, I guess, to do this, how much of this purpose is hers, and how much is she kind of like programmed to want it? I mean, let me say, like, does she own the purpose? Is it something that she actually desires, or is she just kind of like made to want it, if that makes sense?
That's what we call a theme, Jeff. That's that's a big part of what is going to kind of be explored in the miniseries is, you know, who she is and where she comes from and why she's doing this. You know, is she doing this because she's programmed to do it? That's what she's been created for, or is she doing this because she wants to? And that's a question that the Eve Warlock character has to wrestle with in the series, just like Adam Warlock has to wrestle with the fact, well, do I want to do this? Is this, you know, somebody's here to replace me? Maybe I'm just done. Maybe maybe it's time for me to go. And obviously that sort of existential, you know, angst is very familiar to Adam Warlock. So it's a, you know, it's a worthwhile, it's a you know, it's a worthy exploration for his character, because that's kind of where, well, particularly Jim Starlin, that's kind of where Jim took Adam Warlock. He had to wrestle with who am I and why am I here and do I want to be here?
I think that's fascinating. I think also fascinating that once again, whoever created Eve is the one who created Adam Warlock. I assume it's the same creator. And if
I wouldn't assume that.
Oh, okay, wow, okay. But I guess the question is, if whoever made Warlock then gave him a purpose, is it fair for them to then say it's no longer your purpose, or is it really up to him to make the decision?
Well, again, that's stuff that sort of comes out in the wash in the series. I wanted to make sure that this, you know, obviously, you know, Ron and I did Surfer Rebirth and had a great time, and it's a, you know, it's a big cosmic epic kind of story. This is, you know, obviously cut from the same cloth because it's Ron Lim and I doing what we do, but this one is more, I think, more internally driven and more there's more character angst that goes on. There's, you know, there's more sort of weird psychedelic cosmic stuff that goes on, because I wanted to make sure that the people who were of a mind to the people who know Warlock from the Starlin stuff and really got that, particularly the, you know, the early stuff, the stuff from the 70s, which was sort of very kind of psychedelic and mind bending. I wanted to make sure that we got a flavor of that in there too, because that's really, you know, that's really where Adam Warlock comes from. I think that those kinds of stories are what made Adam Warlock a very specific and individual figure in the Marvel universe.
When we think about things like intent, is the intent good for either character? Like, are they inherently good? I mean, the mission you assume with Adam Warlock is good, which means you assume on some level that Eve has a positive intent. Does that, or is even intent a word that is used, can be used for her character?
Well, every villain, or even just every antagonist, you know, if they're a decent character, thinks they're the hero of their own story anyway. You know, Magneto doesn't think he's a bad guy. Dr. Doom doesn't think he's a bad guy. They think they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. They're, you know, they're answering their higher calling. It's the same deal with Eve Warlock as it is with Adam Warlock.
So the team, I'll say Infinity watches the team around Adam. So what is their view on this? Because if Adam decides not to do it anymore, or his purpose is over, that impacts them directly. What is their stakes in this then?
Sure. They're definitely involved, and there's a big role for Pip and there's a big role for Gamora, because to me they are they are in some ways the, you know, the angel and the demon on Adam's shoulder. So they're a big part of the story, but it's very much focused on Adam. I think it's probably not too much of a spoiler to say that, you know, Doctor Strange shows up, mostly because I thought it would be cool to write Doctor Strange again. So, so, you know, Doctor Strange is in there, and, you know, he's dealing with Adam's psyche. So Pip and Gamora are there, Doctor Strange is there, but Adam is very, you know, it's very much an Adam centric story, and there's a lot in the story that Adam decides he has to deal with himself.
Are we then potentially looking at a Doctor Strange Rebirth miniseries coming out through the pipeline?
Well, I mean, there's a Doctor Strange series that just came out, so I don't know that they need a rebirth of Doc. They've got a flourishing series now. But Doc seemed to fit. He seemed, and he's a character that I like writing. I love the way Ron draws Doctor Strange. So I kind of said to the editor, well, let's get Doc in there, and he didn't kick up a fuss. So
so how many issues is Warlock Rebirth slated to run for?
Warlock Rebirth is 5 issues. I'm done writing all 5. And in fact, Ron is done drawing all 5.
So what's next for you in the Marvel universe? Are you going to do, like I said, is there other Rebirth stories coming? Is there, going back to doing some more ongoing for Marvel?
I can't tell you that because it won't be announced for a month.
Oh, but there is something that's going to be announced. Okay, very cool. All right, very exciting. So you're also the creator, like I said, you're extremely busy, of a new series called Resolution as well. The creator, this is a creator-owned series. And it's also a creator-owned published series as a company as well.
Yeah, we're just doing it ourselves. Andy Lanning and I co-wrote it, and Neto Diaz drew it. We've also got pages in there, and a cover by Rick Leonardi, pages by Rick Leonardi, Bart Sears, Tom Ranney, Paul Pelletier, backup story by Paul Pelletier. So that's done. It's just in production as we speak. Getting the I's dotted and the T's crossed, and then it'll go off to press within the next week or so. So that was we did a crowdfund on the Zoop platform for that, because the guys from Zoop came to me and said, "Hey, do you want to do something? You got something laying around?" So I called Andy, and this is what we came up with. It's Resolution is in the briefest possible description of it is it's Green Lantern Corps meets Unforgiven.
Very cool. Now, is this your first creator-owned series?
Oh no, I've done 5 or 6 or 7 others. So it's the most recent one. Certainly won't be the last one, but it's the one that's the closest to coming out right now.
So as you said, it's the series being co-written by Andy Lanning, who, for DC fans, this team up, the Marz Lanning team up from Endless Winter, DC Endless Winter, which I do think is when I interviewed you last was for Endless Winter. So what makes this collaboration so successful? Why do you guys work so well together?
I think we just have a very similar story sensibility, character driven and visually driven. It's very much Andy does kind of what I do, and I kind of do what Andy does. And we've been really good friends for 20 years or more. So we end up doing stuff, and it's very comfortable together. I think it's when you co-write with somebody, I think you have to like that person too. You have to have a certain shared sensibility, or you're always pulling in opposite directions.
So when you're co-writing, are you guys literally co-writing the words together, or are you taking apart or an aspect he's taking apart and you're swapping it, or is one doing more of like the plot, one's doing more of dialogue? How's that working?
Usually what we do is kind of come up with the story, just in rough form, kind of an outline form, and we'll both pitch in notes on that, on a shared Google Doc. And then generally Andy will break down the plot. I will go in and do my notes and kibitz on the plot, and then when get it to the artist, and then when the pages come in, I usually write all the dialogue, and then the dialogue goes to Andy and he puts in his 2 cents. So there, it's very much, Andy probably does more of the plot and I probably do more of the dialogue, but there's shared responsibilities for both.
So, and the story centers around, I'm probably get the name wrong, Zan Maddox, is that how you say it?
Yep, Zan Maddox.
Zan Maddox. So she's a character who was a member of the Outer Space Corps called the Resolute, and she quit. Now, was quitting her own choice? Was she kind of like pushed out? How did that function for
Well, therein lies part of the story.
her?
She has departed she's departed the Resolute. She's no longer part of it. She's retreated to a remote world, and then kind of gets sucked back into to what to the life she left behind, because her villain, her arch nemesis, has returned.
So, as you said, they're powered by these exosuits, which was, I guess, sort of the Green Lantern aspect of it. So, what is kind of how these exosuits, how do they function?
Well, turns them into superheroes, basically. So the suits, and it's not just a suit, it's it's sort of a biological process where people who are genetically predisposed to accepting this stuff have implants and procedures, and by these alien overlords who run the Resolute, to turn them into these heroes called blades. And once they turn into blades, basically once they become a member of the Green Lantern Corps or the Nova Corps, or almost the Legion of Superheroes, they can, they access dark matter energy, and they can do it's the stuff you expect, fly in space and generate energy, and all of the cool visual stuff that goes along with doing a cosmic book. So once you depart the Resolute, you've still got all of that. You still got all that stuff plugged into your body. So Zan doesn't want to come back to service, so to speak, but she's ultimately left with very little choice.
So, as you said, they're genetically predisposed to joining the Resolute. I mean, are they? I guess, is that they're the choice there for them to join it? Is it, or do they deserve because they have the genetics? Is there a connection there, or is it kind of like everyone gets a shot and you see who survives?
Well, there's a bit of all that. It's we've selected you to do this, and then not everybody comes out the other end of the process. Which is part of the backstory that we reveal in the plot of the graphic novel.
Now,
so there's there is a dark side to, no pun intended. There's a dark side to kind of this heroic aspect.
So the species that created the suits are called the Hilt. So how much of them are going to be revealed their backstory in this issue?
You get a decent bit of their backstory. You get a bit more of it in the backup story that Paul Pelletier wrote, which is kind of the villain's origin, or that Paul Pelletier drew. Not that Paul can't write; I'm sure he'd do a fine job. But Paul Pelletier drew it. Keith Champagne inked it. So the story sort of starts at the end in some ways. The story starts at the end of her career, and we reveal bits and pieces of her career as we go. That's what some of the flashback imagery is, interspersed throughout the book by guys like Tom Ranney and Bart Sears and Paul Pelletier, Rick Leonardi. So you get kind of where she is now, and which is kind of a sorrowful end, and you get, these were sort of the glory days.
So are they, how close to the Hilt to, and how they interact with their group, to the Guardians and their Green Lantern Corps? I mean, are they active? Are they like, guys, go after this sector, whatever? Or are they kind of just like, we did this, figure it out?
No, there's a structure there, and frankly, just like the Guardians, the Hilt are kind of dicks too. So there's again a sort of a dark underbelly to this service, to this heroism, that there's a price to be paid for doing this. And that was one of the themes we wanted to play with, is that when you take on this responsibility, It's, you know, the risks are probably greater than the rewards, and you don't, you know, you don't get the sunny outcome a lot of the times.
So are they altruists then? They're just doing good deeds, or is there something deeper to their motivations?
They are the Hilt are survivors of a previous universe that was destroyed, so they have come into our universe as a way to as a way to survive, certainly, but hopefully as a way to not repeat the mistakes of their former universe. But some of that isn't clear just yet. We haven't revealed a lot of those details because we wanted them to remain somewhat mysterious and aloof, and you know, they are, you know, inscrutable aliens in a lot of ways. And so narratively, we try to make sure that we're not revealing too much. We don't want this to be a textbook of how all this stuff works. We want to hint at things, but you know, the story has to take precedent over, you know, the story has to take precedent over the backstory.
So the antagonist, how is he connected to Zan, and what motivates him, and also is he connected to the hilt as well?
He exists because of the hilt in a specific way that is revealed in the story. But Zan ultimately was able to defeat her antagonist, who is called Tau the Desolation. So he is, you know, in a great many ways, he's the, you know, he's the Thanos of her story. You know, he's the dark side of her story. But she defeated him. She basically, you know, burned out his brain and left him for dead. But he wasn't dead, and therein lies the problem.
So I mean, is the Resolute like police? I mean, is she? How much of what their decisions are I don't know if legal is the right word, but through process, or are they sort of more Punisher than, let's say, cop?
Well, it's somewhere in between the two, I think. You know, you know, they are their own police force, which I guess is kind of what too many police forces are now. So they're, you know, they are, if not judge, jury, and executioner, at least judge and jury. So so yeah, they're, you know, it's not like they've gone to each world and, you know, sort of plugged into that legal system of whatever world it is. They're you know, they're sort of above all of that.
I was gonna say, because I mean, so he basically got lobotomized by her, because that's pretty cold.
Yeah, you know, she left him in a very bad state. I don't want to reveal too much of the story, but she left him in a very bad state, but stopped short of killing him. And that's a decision that comes back to Horner.
Now, you said this is gonna be a graphic novel, so does the whole story contain the graphic novel? Is this the first of a series of graphic novels?
This is really the first part of what we hope will be a series of graphic novels. So this is, you know, so the first chunk of this is kind of the first chapter, and then some of the story we want to tell. Hopefully we can, you know, we can get back to this at some point in the near future and get started on the next batch. But you know, this is the first chunk. You know, it's a matter of balancing all our schedules, particularly that of Neto Diaz, who's drawn the Predator book for Marvel right now, and has done some X-Men books, and he's, you know, he's kind of cresting the wave career-wise right now, which is awesome. We're very thankful for him. And you know, and frankly proud of him for, you know, for kind of breaking through and making his mark at Marvel. Andy and I had met Neto while we were doing a graphic novel for the Twilight Imperium game, you know, like board game franchise. So Andy and I co-wrote like a 120-page graphic novel set in that universe, and Neto was the guy that drew that. And we had a great time working with him, and actually sort of just could see him getting better basically every page of that graphic novel, and just felt like he was the right choice for this one too.
So is it difficult when you write something that's like brand new to do all that world building, and does it help having a great artist to, I mean, does that work towards the world building as well, his visuals?
Oh, sure. I mean, you have to, again, you have to do that world building so that the reader feels comfortable in that world and feels like it's real enough that they should care about that world and those people. Some of it was designed by Rick Leonardi when he was initially going to draw the whole thing, and then schedule-wise it didn't work out. But Rick did a lot of the designs, and then Neto picked up all that and added on top of it, and then created a bunch of stuff that he brought to the series as well. So it's really the product of two pretty great artists.
So as you said, it's through Zoop. So if the campaign is running right now, if you miss the campaign, will it be available to people outside Zoop?
There will probably be some copies left after we do all the fulfillment. We haven't decided on how we're going to get those out to people, but pay attention to my Twitter feed or Andy's Twitter feed for info on that. We'll see what kind of numbers we have left once everything's fulfilled.
So when does the campaign end on Zoop?
It ended already. This has been a while. So we're really we opened the campaign up for a couple of weeks again to get some people in, and that closed, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago. So so we're really, I mean, literally we're just waiting for final proofs so we can get those files to the printer and hit the button. I think, but I think we've got, we've seen kind of everything lettered and colored, and, really happy with the way the book came out. So hopefully this is just the first one of a number, and we'll have more information on how to get a copy of the stuff that's left, once everybody that did pledge to the campaign is taken care of.
Yeah, like I was gonna say, because I guess I missed the campaign and it sounds fantastic. I wanted to get my copy. So when will people you think be able to get their copy? The ones who did pledge, is it coming soon? Because he says being printed.
Yeah,
soon?
I mean, obviously it's literally within a week, maybe 10 days. We hope to be sending the files off to press. And obviously the devil's always in the details. You proof it over and over and over again, and you get to the point where hopefully there's nothing left to catch. There are no other glitches or mistakes or anything like that. And then it's really a matter of how long it takes. We're gonna print in the US so that we don't have the huge shipping time printing from the Far East or Europe. So ideally will be, after the print, it'll take after the print run, it'll take a few weeks for binding, because it's a hardcover. So it'll have it's binding, and then everything's shipped out to the fulfillment house, and it'll be fulfilled pretty quickly thereafter. So month and a half, something like that. Hopefully this book will be in people's hands. But with the supply chain as it is now, you're never quite sure what's going to happen. You're never quite sure when paper is going to be available. It's somewhat of a crapshoot, because obviously if there's not all the paper in the world for printing this stuff, the paper that they do have goes to Marvel and DC. It goes to the bigger clients, because they're kind of the steady regular clients, and they're the ones you take care of. So we'll have a bit more of an update on that once we get information from the printers to say this is the date it goes on the press, because printing this stuff is a one-day process. Then it's the slog of binding and packing and shipping and all that.
So for our listeners, please pick up Resolution, pick up Warlock Rebirth, check out for Firefly. Mr. Marz, absolute honor. Like I said, you're one of my favorite writers, so big deal for me. Have a great night, sir, and thank you so much.
Thanks, Jeff. Always a pleasure. We'll do it again soon.